Hi everyone, I am Dr. Satyanarayanan, Chief Scientist of CSIR Central Electrochemical Research Institute, Karaikudi. In this lecture, I am going to give a bird's eye view about corrosion and its fundamentals. Before going into the subject, let me introduce CSIR SECRI for the benefit of the younger audience. CSIR Central Electrochemical Research Institute, popularly known as SECRI, is one among the 38 research establishments of Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, New Delhi. Thanks to Vallal Dr. R. M. Azhappa Chettiar, who donated 15 lakh rupee and 300 acres of land in 1948 to establish this institution at Karaikudi. Its foundation stone was laid by the then Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru during 25th July 1948, and it was dedicated to nation by the then Vice President Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. As on date, CSIR SECRI has around 111 scientists and other technical and administrative staff and caters to the need of the Indian industries and other industries in abroad in solving the various industrial problems by electrochemical routes. SECRI also has a BTech program, a unit of its nature called BTech in Chemical and Electrochemical Engineering, affiliated to Anna University, Chennai. And it has two extension centers, one at Mandapam, another at Chennai. Devoted fully for electrochemical science and technology, SECRI has various core strengths: corrosion and material protection, electrochemical power systems, electronics, electrocatalysis and bioelectrochemistry, electroplating and metal finishing, electroorganic and material electrochemistry, electrochemical process engineering. Coming to the subject, corrosion and its control. What is corrosion? Why it is so important? Let me start my talk with the book definition of corrosion. Corrosion can be defined as the degradation of material due to its reaction with its environment. This degradation may be the reduction in the useful properties of the material or the weakening of the material due to the thinning and so on and so forth. Corrosion causes huge economic loss, not only to the industries but also to the households. For a nation, whether it is developed or under development, it amounts to around 3 to 5% of its GDP towards corrosion and its mitigation. There are various losses which makes corrosion a so significant one. It can be classified into two categories: direct losses and indirect losses. For example, the cost of materials which are lost due to corrosion comes under direct loss. The cost due to the coatings and its application to mitigate corrosion comes under direct loss, and the use of corrosion inhibitors or cost of the corrosion inhibitors also comes under direct losses. There are other indirect losses also. For example, if a company or an industry is forced to shut down due to corrosion problem, then the production time lost and the product lost is also an indirect loss. Loss of the product, probably leakage of some petroleum products, etc. in the petroleum industry, loss of efficiency. For example, the loss of heat transfer efficiency of heat exchangers due to corrosion, contamination of food product. For example, if it is a food material manufacturing industry, for example, the infant foods and all, where the existence of corrosion at one point or other may also contaminate the product and it will become non-saleable. And it also leads to the conservation of metal resources and ultimately human safety. If it is a collapse of a bridge due to corrosion problem, if it is a collapse of a multi-story building or a nuclear reactor due to corrosion, ultimately it results in human safety. Before proceeding further into the scientific part of corrosion, let me introduce the basic unit by which corrosion is estimated. We know the length is measured by meter and weight is measured by kilogram. Like that, corrosion is estimated by two standard units, millimeter per year and mils per year. What is millimeter per year? If a particular metal or alloy is exposed to a corrosive environment, so much of millimeter of material will be lost per year by corrosion, that is MMPY. MPY means mils per year or 10 power minus 3 inches per year. 1 milli-inch is called mil. So the relationship between MMPY and MPY is given like this: MMPY equal to MPY into 0.025. Like the blood pressure or diabetes, corrosion can also be classified into 3 categories. If the rate of corrosion is less than 0.125 millimeter per year, it is designated as a safe unit. And if it is 0.125 to 1.25 millimeter per year, it is moderate. One can live with it. And if it exceeds 1.25 millimeter per year, it is termed as severe corrosion, and one should need immediate attention to be paid for that one. Let me go into the little chemistry part of corrosion. For example, take magnesium metal. When magnesium is exposed to atmosphere or when it is immersed in water, it will have a reaction like this. Magnesium plus water plus oxygen gives magnesium hydroxide. The delta G, that gives free energy for this reaction, is minus 1,42,600 calories. Take the example of gold. If a similar piece of gold is placed in water or kept in atmosphere, gold plus water molecule plus oxygen gives this hydroxide. The Gibbs free energy is for this reaction is delta G is plus 15,700 calories. Higher negative value of Gibbs free energy predicts that this reaction is more spontaneous, whereas the high positive value of this reaction says that it is not at all spontaneous. So among the metals, there are some metals which can immediately react to the environment, and they are called as active materials as far as corrosion is concerned. There are some metals like gold which will not react spontaneously with the environment, leading to corrosion, and hence they are called passive metals. Okay, where from these metals are obtained? We get all the metals from the mother earth in the form of a ore. By doing a lot of metallurgy and the extraction procedures, we extract the metal from that particular ore. For example, iron ore is normally an iron oxide, and by melting it and putting a lot of energy into it, we form metallic iron, and this metal, we add some alloys like carbon or small elements to make it into a useful material, say for example steel, and hence with that steel sheet or steel rod, we make car body, pipes, rebar, and so on and so forth. This material, after this much of energy spent, is in highly unstable position as far as thermodynamics is concerned. So when it is exposed to the environment, it reacts with the environment and goes back to the original form of iron oxide. So the metal which is extracted from the ore, due to the reaction called corrosion, go back to the ore form. So it is also otherwise defined as reverse metal extraction. So corrosion is inevitable. Since it is the metals are in thermodynamically unstable status, they are normally want to go back to its safe or thermodynamically stable state, namely the oxides or hydroxides. In general, the corrosion can be classified into two categories: dry corrosion and wet corrosion. Metal exposed to gas or vapor at high temperature comes under dry corrosion, and a metal which is exposed to normal atmosphere, immersed in underground, or immersed in water is coming under wet corrosion. We normally come across this wet corrosion, and we are going to see the chemistry part of wet corrosion in coming slides. Let me take the example of zinc, which is a highly active material. Zinc dissolves with hydrogen evolution. All chemistry students or chemistry faculties know this. When zinc is a piece of zinc is put in hydrochloric acid, in a beaker of hydrochloric acid, this is a reaction which will occur. Zinc plus hydrochloric acid gives zinc chloride plus hydrogen. One atom of zinc metal reacts with two molecules of hydrogen chloride reacts to form or goes to one molecule of zinc chloride and plus one molecule of hydrogen gas. This is very spontaneous. Immediately when you put zinc into the hydrochloric acid beaker, this reaction will take place. So zinc is known as a base or active metal, as I already mentioned. Take the example of platinum. If you put platinum in the same acid, it does not react with the acid. And hence, as I already mentioned, platinum, like gold, will also come under the category of noble metal. Let me explain the reactions involved in this process by using a small cartoon. Take a small rod of the zinc, and this is a small beaker containing hydrochloric acid. Immediately when you put zinc into it, and we will have zinc dissolution and lot of gas bubbles, this pink colored one, or hydrogen evolution that occurs on the surface of zinc. Similarly, if you put a similar rod of platinum in the same hydrochloric acid beaker, nothing will happen because it is a noble metal. Here I have an ammeter just to indicate the current flow, and here the switch is open. So the reactions occur only on zinc surface. We have zinc metal dissolution and also a vigorous gas evolution from the surface of zinc. Zinc and platinum not connected, no reaction on platinum. Now, the reaction, as I already introduced, zinc plus 2HCl gives zinc chloride plus hydrogen gas. Now, I am connecting this switch. Now, the switch is connected. So, the zinc is electrically connected to the platinum. Now, what happens here? The zinc metal dissolution occurs on the zinc surface. Now you can see all the pink dots got transferred to the platinum surface because there is an electrical connectivity between these. And also you can notice that here the current also flows. Please see, there is, when the switch is open, there is no flow of current. When the switch is connected, there is a flow of current. Zinc and platinum connected, current flows, and hydrogen is evolved on platinum. Here you can see only black dots, that is the metal dissolution on zinc surface, and the pink dots, that is the hydrogen gas evolution on the platinum surface. Here what happens? 2H plus, the hydrogen ions available in the hydrochloric acid, plus the electrons which are available from the zinc dissolution, which are transported through this wire, which reaches the platinum surface, reacts and forms hydrogen gas. So the reaction occurring here is zinc dissolves into zinc 2 plus ions. These ions, black colored dots, leaves the metal matrix and goes into solution as zinc ions. And these two electrons are liberated, and these electrons travel through the external wire to the platinum surface and gets consumed like this. So when we connect zinc and platinum together in a hydrochloric acid trough, this original reaction, zinc plus 2HCl gives zinc chloride plus hydrogen gas, can be split into two reactions. One is zinc gives zinc 2 plus ions plus 2 electrons. One atom of zinc metal dissolve and get into solution as one zinc ion, which is into the solution, and 2 electrons on the metal surface. And these 2 electrons get transferred to the platinum surface by the reaction, and there it will consume 2 hydrogen ions available in the acid near to the surface of the platinum, combined with these 2 electrons which are liberated here and transported to the platinum surface and form hydrogen gas. These are known as electrochemical reactions. Why it is so? It is not only chemical reaction, it involves the electrons also. So a chemical reaction involving electrons are termed as electrochemical reactions. Hence, the corrosion phenomena itself is an electrochemical reaction. So reactions that involve both chemical change and the transfer of charge are termed as electrochemical reactions. So the various reactions, like the previous zinc gives zinc 2 plus 2 electrons, these are called anodic reactions. The various examples are zinc gives zinc 2 plus 2 electron, zinc corrosion. Iron gives Fe2 plus 2 electron, iron corrosion. Aluminum corrosion. And then ferrous ion further oxidation, etc. And here you can see here, in all the cases, the electrons are liberated, or these reactions produce electrons, and they are termed as oxidation reactions, or otherwise called as anodic reactions. Similarly, cathodic reactions are those which consumes electrons. For example, the water molecule plus the dissolved oxygen plus the electron gives 4 OH. This is oxygen reduction, hydrogen evolution, copper plating, ferric ion reduction, and all. Here you can see all reactions consume electron, and they are called reduction reactions or cathodic reactions. So, in a nutshell, say for example, if you take the case of iron in hydrochloric acid, similar to zinc, if you place a small nail in an hydrochloric acid, you will have the reaction Fe gives Fe plus 2 hydrochloric acid gives FeCl2 plus hydrogen gas. This can be split into 2 reactions as earlier. Fe gives Fe2 plus 2 electrons or Ze, which is an anodic reaction or oxidation reaction. And another one is 2H plus 2 electron giving hydrogen gas. This is a cathodic reaction. So what one should know is the corrosion reaction is an electrochemical phenomena. This reaction itself is constituted by 2 complementary reactions. One is anodic reaction and another cathodic reaction. These 2 reactions occur simultaneously. So if you want to control corrosion, any one of the reactions should be stopped. For example, if one can stop this hydrogen gas evolution in the acid medium, then the corrosion will not proceed because charge neutrality has to be maintained. Various examples for the other environments are, if it is an atmospheric corrosion, the anodic reaction is metal dissolves, giving metal ions plus electrons, and ultimately it forms, with the available moisture, forms metal hydroxide. The cathodic reaction will be the oxygen and the water molecule or moisture plus these electrons gives hydroxyl ion formation. Similarly, for the immersed condition, we have the metal dissolution as anodic, and for if it is an acidic environment, the hydrogen ions available in the solution combine with the electron to form hydrogen gas. If it is neutral, the dissolved oxygen available in the water combines with the electron to form hydroxyl ions, and in alkaline, the water reacts with the electrons to form these kind of hydroxyl ions. Similarly, for underground also, we have anodic and cathodic reactions. Another better example which we will explain is, say for example, we have taken a beaker containing copper sulfate solution and then another beaker containing hydrochloric acid solution. Here we are putting a zinc rod and here we are putting a copper rod, and we are connecting these two by an electrical wire or normal wire, and the ions will be transported through a salt bridge like this. Here, as I mentioned earlier, zinc dissolves and goes into solution as zinc 2 plus ions, leaving behind 2 electrons, and these 2 electrons will get transported to copper. And here, the 2 electrons on reaching the copper, there are plenty of Cu2 plus ions available in copper sulfate solution, and they combine together to form copper ion and get deposited over surface. So after some time, you can see the zinc rod dissolves or thins due to corrosion, whereas the copper electrodeposition occurs and hence thickness increases. If you take a beaker containing hydrochloric acid and if you put zinc ion, then you can witness this vigorous corrosion reaction by enormous gas bubbles or hydrogen gas which are evolving from the surface of these 2 metals. How it has happened? Earlier I have demonstrated that when we combine zinc and platinum, zinc is anodic or active metal, platinum is noble or cathodic metal. If you have only zinc or only iron, still the corrosion is occurring and there are plenty of gas bubbles or hydrogen evolution occurs. It is because on a single metal surface, for example zinc, we have anodic site and cathodic site, which are very adjacent to each other. So at this anodic site, the metal dissolves and the electrons get transported to this place, and here the gas evolution occurs. So the same metal will have both anodic and cathodic sides. Accordingly, it will have a corrosion. So, in a nutshell, when we have a zinc immersed in hydrochloric acid, zinc metal dissolves or get dissociated from the metallic matrix and goes into solution as zinc 2 plus ions. And these electrons here combine with hydrogen ions available in the hydrochloric acid to form H2 gas. So this is the final version, or one can understand that corrosion phenomena. The corrosion can be prevented by coating, inhibitors, cathodic or anodic protection, and design for higher wall thickness and all. Let me introduce these things in the coming slides. There are various factors which influence corrosion. The composition of the material itself causes various anodic and cathodic sites available on the same material, whether it is if it is a homogeneous single phase alloy, the cold working, grain shape, grain size, and all decides where it is anodic and where it will be cathodic. If it is a multi-phase alloy, distribution of the amount of anodic phase, for example, aluminum copper alloy will have aluminum anodic areas and copper cathodic areas, etc. Similarly, heat-treated alloys, for example, stainless steel, will also form grain boundaries sensitive, and they will become anodic areas. Other factors which influence corrosion are summarized here in this slide. If we take three environments, maybe atmospheric exposure, or immersion in the liquid, or underground, what are all the factors that influence corrosion? For example, in atmospheric, the dust available in the atmosphere is a major culprit. These dust settle over the surfaces and they are hygroscopic in nature and retains moisture. Because of this moisture retention, they also influence corrosion. So, a lot of dust in an industrial atmosphere causes a lot of moisture retention and also influences corrosion. When it retains moisture, the gaseous contaminants from the nearby industries, which has carbon dioxide or H2S or SO2, etc., or if it is a marine atmosphere, then we will have chloride ions in the marine atmosphere. These will also get returned, they also retained by the moisture or the retained by the dust, and hence influences the corrosion in a greater way. When it is in immersion condition, the pH of the solution plays a major role. And also, in addition to that, the various dissolved gases like oxygen or carbon dioxide or H2S or SO2, various dissolved salts, availability of bacteria, temperature, and the velocity, it is a flowing medium. These are all decides or influences corrosion in a greater way. And also in the case of sea, it is the depth of immersion. For example, if a pipeline is kept in the sea, it will corrode at a faster rate because we have chloride ions there, we have a lot of oxygen. If the same pipeline is kept in the very bottom of the sea, it is almost corrosion free because the dissolved oxygen is negligible there in the very bottom of the sea. So this influences corrosion. Similarly, in the case of underground, that is buried structures, the porosity of the soil, which determines the aeration, influences it to a greater extent. It is being normally monitored by the electrical resistance of the soil, and if the soil has a resistance of say 1000 to 10,000 centimeters cube, then it is moderate, and if the resistance is above 1 lakh, it is not at all affected. And various dissolved salts, the moisture available, the bacteria available, and the influence of the stay current, the current which is being induced by the nearby electric tracks and all, also influences corrosion to a greater extent. Other parameters which influence corrosion are if we have two dissimilar metals which are connected together or which are joined together, then it leads to a particular corrosion called galvanic corrosion. Let me explain it in the coming slide. Use of different strength materials also causes corrosion, improper design. These are all the various factors which influence corrosion. Like human being, corrosion also manifests in different forms. It can be broadly classified into three categories: general corrosion, localized corrosion, and mechanical corrosion. This picture shows the economic loss due to corrosion by these various forms of corrosion. For example, the general or uniform corrosion causes nearly 25% of its the total economic loss. Pitting corrosion another 25, another 15% stress corrosion cracking, the other forms of corrosion a meager portion. So under the general corrosion, we have uniform corrosion, galvanic corrosion, de-alloying, cavitation corrosion. In the localized corrosion, we have pitting, crevice, intergranular, filiform, etc. Under mechanical corrosion, we have stress corrosion cracking, hydrogen damage, corrosion fatigue, fretting corrosion, and so on and so forth. Let me in the coming slides gives a small flavor about this corrosion, because these forms of corrosion itself is a big lecture to be delivered for 2 hours or so. Uniform corrosion is a corrosion where the entire surface corrodes uniformly. The surface normal reaction, electrochemical reaction, which causes the rusting over the entire uniform surface. In one way, uniform corrosion is advantageous because the corrosion rate can be easily determined and corrosion can be easily controlled. Pitting corrosion is a localized corrosion where the corrosion occurs in a microscopic defect areas on metal surface, and they are very dangerous because they cannot be easily predicted, and also the existence of pitting can be known only when the leakage occurs. Crevice corrosion, when two flanges are joined or pipe ends are joined, in between they normally use a gasket to avoid leakage. And under this shaded area, there will be a corrosion which is influenced by the stagnant electrolyte available in this area. This is called crevice corrosion. Galvanic corrosion, when two dissimilar metals are connected, then the active metal will corrode at a faster rate and a noble metal or passive metal will have no corrosion. For example, in the household, we might have seen a GA pipe with a brass or copper tap. So since brass is a noble one compared to GA, this GA corrodes. Similarly, if you have a aluminium with a sheet with a rivet, if this rivet is a different metal and it is a noble metal, then the aluminium corrodes at a faster rate. Intergranular corrosion, the corrosion, a special form of corrosion which occurs through the granular boundaries are called intergranular corrosion. De-alloying, certain type of corrosion under certain conditions. For example, brass, which is an alloy of zinc and copper. Under certain conditions, the zinc alone leaves the metal matrix and leaving behind the copper-rich surface. It is called a dezincification. This is a special type of de-alloying. Similarly, graphitization, where the iron leaves the surface and leaving behind the carbon-rich surface. Filiform corrosion, a corrosion which occurs beneath the film. Stress corrosion cracking, which is due to the coexistence of stress and the chemically corrosive environment. Hydrogen blistering or hydrogen embrittlement, where the hydrogen penetrates through the metal surface and results in the blistering of the surfaces. Corrosion fatigue, it is a special form of stress corrosion cracking. And fretting corrosion, where the corrosive environment with the simultaneous movement of surfaces or rubbing of surfaces occurs. Cavitation corrosion, where the bubbles are the normal air bubbles which occurs over the surface, burst and create lot of corrosion. So these are all the various forms of corrosion. And after giving a flavor of various forms of corrosion, let me take you a little deep into the thermodynamics part of corrosion. All might have heard about EMF series, standard electromotive force series. It is nothing but an arrangement of metals based on their standard reduction potential. Here, in arranging these metals, the hydrogen reduction potential that is assumed as 0. And with respect to or with reference to hydrogen, all the metals potentials were measured in their own ionic environment. They are called standard EMF and they are listed here. Here you can see some metals are standing above the hydrogen positioning and they have a positive potential. Some are below the hydrogen having negative potentials. These metals which are below hydrogen and having negative potential can easily liberate hydrogen and hence they can very easily undergo corrosion. Whereas the metals which are above hydrogen 0 point, having positive potentials cannot or do not liberate hydrogen easily, and hence they are not getting involved in corrosion. And hence, this table having a noble metal end or the active metal end. This table is highly useful for a corrosion engineer to predict about corrosion. For example, if we are supposed to select a metal, then this table suggests that compared to zinc, which is having high negative value, nickel is preferential. Even though nickel is also prone for corrosion, it will experience less corrosion because it's very less negative compared to zinc. Similarly, if the choice is given between zinc, nickel, and copper, one can choose copper because ultimately copper is very less corrosion or almost negligible corrosion compared to these two metals. And also, if one is forced to have two metals joining, then this table suggests that those metals which are further separated, there will be more corrosion. For example, if we have magnesium and nickel, if we combine these two metals, then the magnesium, which is a very high negative potential, will corrode at a very faster rate. That means the active metal will corrode at a faster rate and the less active metal will be protected. This is the principle or the way by which corrosion can be controlled. This is called a sacrificial protection. I will explain you in the coming slides. And also, if the metal is further separated, then the corrosion problem will be more. Having said all these merits of this electromotive force series, this series also has a lot of disadvantages. For example, this table presents only the metals because the metals in their own ionic environments, potentials were measured and listed here. And hence, in the normal conditions on our day-to-day life, we never use any metal a purest form. We normally use the alloys of those metals. Since alloys didn't find a place here, this series of no practical use. And also, this series is an arrangement based on the metals in its own ionic environment of unit activity. We never come across a situation or an environment where the metal will be exposed to its own ionic environment. And hence, the prediction by this EMF series is a misleading one. Also, this table will not take into consideration the temperature of the environment or the pressure or the flow and so on and so forth. Because of these various reasons, even though it is little useful in the initial or early days of corrosion research, this series finds its limited usage. To overcome these difficulties, there is another series called the galvanic series. Here, the metals or alloys, please note it down, alloys are also included in this series. Metals and alloys are taken and they are exposed to a particular environment. For example, in this case, seawater, and their potentials are measured and they are orderly arranged like this. Here, the advantage is that unlike the EMF series, we don't have any numerical value of the potential given. It is only the relative positioning of the metal or alloy is given here. And hence, since this series accommodates the alloys also, it has more practical value. And here you can see here, the same alloy will find two different places. For example, stainless steel can be here, which is in active state, and the same stainless steel 188 stainless steel may be in the passive state also. So this series, which is very specific for a particular environment, is highly useful for a corrosion engineer to decide upon which material to be selected for their usage. Again, even though it includes alloys, it doesn't say anything about the rate of a reaction, which is purely kinetics in nature, and also it doesn't have any information about the temperature, etc., and so on and so forth, being its a thermodynamic phenomena. The next thermodynamic phenomena, which can explain corrosion better, is potential pH diagram. Here, I am planning to spend little more time for the benefit of the students and other audience. Please go through it very carefully. This potential pH diagram or the 4-by diagram, the person or the scientist who invented this diagram is very, very useful for corrosion and its prediction. It is constructed with the potential on the y-axis and pH on the x-axis. As everybody knows the definition of pH, so I don't want to spend. This line here in this potential pH diagram, I will be drawing so many lines representing various chemical equilibriums. For example, this red line represents the hydrogen equilibrium. 2H plus 2 electron gives hydrogen gas. So as you might have seen in the EMF series, its potential starts from 0. So this line represents the hydrogen equilibrium line. What does it mean? Below this line, hydrogen is stable in gas form, whereas above this, water is stable under various pH and potential conditions. Similarly, the oxygen reduction line is 2H2 gives O2 plus 4H plus 4 electron. This is represented by these green lines starting from around 1.3. Okay. So what does it mean? It means above this green line, O2 is stable. Now you can see in between red and green line, water will be stable as water molecule. If we cross this green line, oxygen is stable in gas form. And if we go below this red line, hydrogen is stable again in gaseous form. Okay. Now let us take the very same example of zinc corrosion. This line represents the equilibrium of zinc ion giving zinc 2 plus 2 electrons. Its EMF potential is around minus 0.9, and this line represents this equilibrium. That means zinc metal is stable below this line, and zinc ion. See, you can see here, this is the equilibrium between zinc metal and zinc ion. So this line is the boundary between these two species. So above this species, zinc 2 plus is stable. Below this line boundary, zinc is stable. Okay. And this line represents an equilibrium of zinc 2 plus 2OH minus. Because I'm going to the higher pH values, we'll have more hydroxyl ions. So zinc ion plus 2OH gives zinc hydroxide. So this vertical line is the boundary between zinc ion and zinc hydroxide. Already we have mentioned that zinc 2 plus is stable here. This clearly mentions that on the left side of this line, zinc ion is stable. On the right side of it, it is zinc hydroxide ion is stable in solid form. This cross line represents zinc plus hydroxyl ion giving zinc hydroxide. Here you can see it is again the equilibrium between zinc metal and zinc hydroxide with the available hydroxyl ions. So as you can clearly see, this domain, only this small domain, is zinc hydroxide stable. It is sure that below this line, zinc metal is stable. So this line represents the equilibrium between zinc hydroxide and further zinc O2 minus ion. So this line, vertical line, is the boundary between zinc hydroxide and this one with the increased availability of hydroxyl ions. So you can see here on the left hand side, zinc hydroxide is stable. On the right hand side, we have zinc O2 minus ion is available, which is stable in the solution. The final line is zinc plus very high concentration of hydroxyl ion availability may get transformed into zinc O2 minus plus water plus electron. So this line gives the boundary between zinc metal and zinc O2 minus. Already zinc O2 minus is available here. So this is a equilibrium between these two species. Here we have seen under various potential and pH conditions. For example, below this line, under various pH conditions and potential regions, zinc metal is stable. This very big area with a boundary of this line and this line, we will have zinc 2 plus ion stable under various potentials and pHs. On going to the higher pH, under these various potentials, zinc hydroxide is stable for a short area, and then it will get transformed to zinc O2 minus. Now, the area where the zinc metal is stable is called immune domain or immunity domain. Under that means these potential and pH ranges, if we have zinc, zinc will be stable. It will not undergo corrosion at all. That means zinc is immune to corrosion. The area where zinc is available in ionic form, here and here, it is called corrosion. It is because of corrosion only it occurs in these big areas of huge potential range and pHs. Will have zinc existing in the form of ions, and hence they are called corrosion domain or corrosion region. A small narrow region where zinc hydroxide in solid form is stable is called passive. Here there will be an initial corrosion so that the zinc metal gets transformed to zinc hydroxide, but it will cover the zinc surface and form a film over the surface, and hence the metal will become passive. So as you can see here, the entire potential pH regions can be classified into three domains, namely immune domain, corrosion domain, and passive domain. The metal, in this case zinc, if it is maintained in these potential pH conditions, it will not corrode at all. It is under immune condition. This is normally called as cathodic protection. By bringing the potential of the zinc to the negative value under various pH conditions, we will be bringing zinc into the immune domain. If we have zinc here in this big domain or in this red domain, it will naturally corrode. Thermodynamically, it is favorable and hence corrosion will occur. If you can manipulate the potential of the zinc so that if you retain the zinc in this small domain, then there will be initial corrosion, but zinc hydroxide will get formed over the surface and the metal is protected by the passive zinc hydroxide, and hence further corrosion will be stopped. Corrosion is thermodynamically impossible in the immune domain. Corrosion is possible but likely to be stifled by solid corrosion product. Here, please recall this line, slanting line is the hydrogen equilibrium. So below that one, in these red zones, corrosion will be possible with the hydrogen evolution as cathodic reaction. And here, oxygen reduction. Under these high positive potentials, corrosion requires some strong oxidizing agents. Similarly, let us take the example of gold. Gold also, this is the hydrogen equilibrium line and this is the oxygen equilibrium line. And here you can see gold has a very big immune domain. That is why gold does not corrode under various potential or pH ranges. So normally, day to day, that gold will be, if it is kept here in any of these areas, it will be immune. And also it has a very big passivity. There are gold also corrode under specific conditions of potential pHs where it will also corrode. Okay. Similarly, for copper, we have the copper pH diagram, copper metal stable, copper 2+ stable, copper oxides, and again here you can see this is the immune domain, and this is corrosion, and this is also corrosion, and this is the passive domain. Will copper corrode in acid? No, because the hydrogen line is well within the immune domain. So hydrogen evolution only occurs below the potential of copper corrosion, and hence copper will not corrode in acid pHs. Will it corrode in neutral? Usually it will just passivate, but corrosion can occur in slightly acidic solutions. Similarly, for iron, we have this ion immune domain. This is the corrosion domain, and this is a big passive domain. Will iron corrode in acid? Yes. Here we have the corrosion domain in the hydrogen line is also there. So hydrogen, by hydrogen evolution, normally it corrodes. Will it corrode in neutral? Yes. In neutral also, by oxygen reduction, it will corrode. In alkaline, no. Iron forms a solid oxide over the surface and hence it gets passivated. So this potential pH diagram gives a very good, is a very good tool to examine the various domains, whether the metal will get protected or is totally free of corrosion or undergo corrosion. Having covered all these thermodynamic parameters, namely the standard EM of series, Then we have seen galvanic series. Finally, we have seen potential phase diagram. All these are all thermodynamic parameters. Please mind it, they don't have any kinetic information. That is, they will never say that the rate of corrosion, etc. It will only predict that corrosion is possible or not. How fast the corrosion will occur cannot be obtained from these thermodynamic data. The kinetic parameters can be obtained from the corrosion monitoring methodologies. Corrosion monitoring, as I said earlier in the first slide itself, corrosion rate can be determined either in millimeter per year or mils per year. There are plenty of methods available to estimate the rate of corrosion. In general, it can be classified into three categories: non-electrochemical methods, electrochemical methods, and NDT methods. Non-electrochemical method means, as the name implies, we have nothing to do with the electrochemically with the corroding metal. And the well-known examples are weight loss method or gravimetric method, electrical resistance method, chemical analysis, etc. Coming to the electrochemical methods, since it involves electrochemistry, it can be further split into two categories: DC method or AC method, depending upon the perturbation or the input signal. If it is a DC signal, it can be, the example may be simple potential measurement or tafel polarization or linear polarization resistance method. The well-known example for the AC method is AC impedance method. And non-destructive testing or NDT methods is a very big ocean. It is useful for its various applications, and in corrosion also. Some of the NDT methods, for example, ultrasonics, radiography, and eddy current finds immense applications in getting the corrosion rate details. Since this corrosion monitoring or corrosion rate estimation itself is a very big area, and just I have given a flavor that there are methods, and based on the various principles, corrosion rates can be estimated. I'm leaving this here because this itself, as I said, for forms of corrosion, it will be yet another lecture for about 2 hours or so. So please know that it is possible that we can estimate the rates of corrosion. I will cover these corrosion control methods or corrosion monitoring methods in a separate lecture like this. Having said all this corrosion, various forms of corrosion, thermodynamic aspects of corrosion, and finally the rates of corrosion, how we can determine the rates of corrosion by various means and all, let me, the final spell, cover some information about the various corrosion control methods. Having said the importance of corrosion or the complexity of corrosion or the economic losses which corrosion brings in, one has to seriously think about the corrosion control methods. It is not a very simple thought that we can simply live with corrosion. That can be applicable for simple corrosions like household pipes and all. Imagine a situation of huge pipelines carrying the petroleum products or the flammable gases and all, etc., where we badly need some corrosion control methods. These corrosion control methods can be broadly classified into 4 categories. Number 1 is modification of metal. As the name implies, the metal which is corrosive can be converted into yet another alloy by adding some small elemental. For example, a steel which is highly corrosive in acidic, neutral, or alkaline environments can be made into a corrosion-free material by alloying a small amount of chromium and nickel and getting a stainless steel alloy. This is an example of alloying. Or we can also have a metallic or the organic coatings over the surface. Here, the modification of metal includes the metal itself is in bulk, can be modified, or its surface can be modified by applying the metallic coatings like zinc coating over a steel sheet or the GI pipe, etc. Or we can apply some organic paint over the surface, thereby the corrosion can be controlled. Imagine if we have a winter season, we wear blanket or we wear jackets, or we have a blanket just to isolate ourselves from the environment. That's the principle by which these coatings work. They simply isolate the metal from the corrosive environment, and hence the corrosion is arrested. The next category is modification of the environment. Here, the corrosive environment itself can be modified. For example, inhibitors. The inhibitors are nothing but chemical compounds which are added in very small quantities to the environment. They form film over the metal surface, or they stop either cathodic or anodic reaction, thereby controls the corrosion. It can be classified into various categories. I'm having a separate slide on this based on whether it is an acidic media or neutral media or alkaline media, etc. In some cases, we know the neutral pH, the oxygen reduction is the major cathodic reaction. If you remove the oxygen by deaeration, then the corrosion can be minimized or stopped. And also, you might have seen in many of the parcels or the small parcel where precious metal elements are transported, they will simply have a small packet containing silica gel and all. The idea is those material will absorb the moisture and they will dehumidify. Once the moisture is removed, then the environment is corrosion free. So this is the modification of environment. The third category is change of metal environment potential. There comes the cathodic protection and anodic protection. I have a separate slide. Here it is again classified into two categories, sacrificial type and impulse current type. I will be explaining in the coming slides. Finally, the fourth category is use of non-metallic materials. For example, instead of GI pipes, one can use PVC pipe. Like that, we can, instead of using steel sheets, we can use PVC sheet and so on and so forth. So these non-metallic materials will not have any corrosion and hence we can come out of corrosion issue. Cathodic protection. This is a very big engineering phenomena or a problem, and hence I will be giving a small hint about what is cathodic protection. Artificial conversion of metal to be protected as a cathode. Please remember in the potential pH diagram, I have mentioned there is a domain called the immune domain in the bottom of those potential pH diagrams. So if the metal's potential is shifted by external means, by using a rectifier or by a current supplier, if we shift the potential of the metal to the cathodic or immune domain, the metal gets protected. See, this is the impulse current technique. Here, this is a pipeline which needs to be protected from corrosion. It is buried under soil. So what we can do is, we can have a DC power supply and connect the negative terminal to the pipeline to be protected and the positive terminal to an anode. Maybe the anode may be a scrap iron or graphite or titanium substrate insoluble anode, etc. So what will happen once this power supply is switched on, the current flow will be like this. This circuit completes. Since this pipe is made as a cathode or electron bridge, they are free from corrosion. It is called, by this way, we are shifting the steel pipeline, which is normally in the corrosion zone of potential pH diagram, into the immune domain. The other method is a sacrificial anode. Please recall that while describing the metals, there are metals which are active metals and there are certain metals which are noble metals. Suppose if we want to protect a steel oil platform which is in the offshore, in the sea, it is normally expected to have a high corrosion because of the corrosivity of the sea water. But if you combine a piece of zinc or magnesium or aluminium, just by attaching it to the steel structure, what will happen? As mentioned in the galvanic corrosion, zinc being a highly active metal compared to the steel, this sacrifices its life. That is, it dissolves and goes into solution as zinc ions and giving begin to electrons, and these electrons will flow like this. Because of this, since this sacrifices its life and protects steel, that's why it is called a sacrificial anode. This anode or the small piece of zinc is an anode and which undergoes corrosion and sacrifices its life and gives protection to this steel structure. That's why you might have seen the zinc coated steel sheets which are used for the industrial roofs and all. They are called galvanized sheets. Similarly, galvanized iron pipes also used. This zinc will sacrifice its life and give protection to the steel sheet or steel pipe. It can find application either in ship hulls offshore platforms, buried pipelines, or storage tanks. These are all the areas where we can either have a cathodic protection by sacrificial protection or impressed current method. Coming to the corrosion inhibitor, as I already mentioned, corrosion inhibitors are chemical substances which are added in small quantities to the environment. Mind it, here we are adding it to the environment so that the corrosion will be controlled or corrosion will be minimized. Depending upon the environment, many compounds are used for corrosion inhibitors. For example, in the acidic media, mostly organic compounds like amines, azoles, unsaturated alcohols, aldehydes, when they are added in small quantities to the environment, then they will either reduce the rate of corrosion of anodic reaction or cathode reaction, or in some cases they form film over the surface and prevents corrosion. If it is a neutral medium, mostly inorganic compounds like polyphosphate, phosphate, zinc, benzoate, nitrate, etc. are being used. In alkaline medium, for example, concrete structure is an alkaline medium, mostly nitrate or monofluorophosphate, citrate. These are all the well-known inhibitors. While making the concrete itself, a small quantity of nitrate will be dissolved in water and mixed along with the concrete ingredients. And if it is available in the concrete, it will give inhibition to the reinforcement rods inside the concrete. Paper phase inhibitors to protect metals during storage and transport. This dicyclohexyl ammonium nitrate is coated on papers, and these paper were wrapped around the metal surfaces and being transported. Coming to the protective coatings, coatings can give protection against corrosion by three ways. One is sacrificial action, second is barrier effect, third is inhibiting effect. Sacrificial action, like for example zinc or magnesium or aluminum. If you have a zinc coating over steel sheet, then the zinc which is coated over steel will sacrifice its life and gives protection to the steel. Barrier effect, as I mentioned already, is almost similar to using a blanket in the winter. It simply isolates active metal from the corrosive environment, thereby it stops corrosion. Inhibiting action, some of the inhibitive ions which are mentioned in the previous slide can be added as an ingredient in the coating, and hence it prevents corrosion. The coating, normally we apply black paint or white paint to our window grills or doors and all. They are all not for corrosion purposes. The corrosion protective coatings are entirely different one, and normally they will be applied as 3 or 4 layers. The first layer over the metal surface is normally called as primer. Its prime function is to have adhesion over the metallic surface, and also it provides adhesion to the subsequent coats. There will be an intermediate coat where huge thickness will be built. Here the moisture transport, ionic transport will be blocked. And the top coat is for giving a resistance to atmosphere. For example, if your metal is coated and exposed to the sunlight, then this coating which is exposed to the sunlight should have coating ingredients which can withstand the UV rays of sunlight. If it is an immersed, then this layer should have an protective mechanism. This slide clearly explains how. This is a steel structure, and primer is the one which is applied immediately over the surface. As I already mentioned, it is this area where we add more corrosion inhibitors as pigments, and the success of the entire coating, all the coating structure depends upon how the primer is successful. It should give a good anchorage to the surface, and also it should give good attachment to the subsequent coats. First coat and second coat are the other subsequent coats. In addition to that, there are certain metals, maybe a noble metal like nickel, chromium, lead can be coated, or sacrificial like zinc, cadmium can be coated, and it can have various corrosion protective applications as mentioned in this table. The various organic coatings or the polymeric coatings which find application for corrosion control are listed here. It may be air oxidizing coating, or simply solvent drying coating, or latex or water thinnable coating, chemically reacting or metal pigmented coating. And here in this type, I have given the generic type. For example, this is the air oxidizing coating is the enamel. It's a well-known example which we are using normally in our households. whatever paint which we are buying in the hardware shops are all enamel paints. And here we have chlorinated rubber, acrylic copolymer and all. They are all having solvent as a component into it. And when applied or by brush or spraying over the surface, the solvent dries or evaporates, leaving behind the three-dimensional coating matrix. Similarly, water-based coatings and other coatings are here mentioned here. Various, while selecting a particular coating, there are numerous properties to be considered. For example, abrasion resistance, flexibility, color, and glass retention. For example, if you buy a car, we need a coating. It need not be a abrasion resistance, but it should have a good color and glass retention. Suppose if you buy a new car and within 6 months if the color fades, no, it will lose. It will not have its own value. Similarly, the temperature range, drying time, mildew, resistance, appearance, and so on. These are all the various properties which need to be considered before selecting a particular coating. And also, under different environmental factors, we have to consider what is the temperature while applying the paint, what is the humidity level, what is the chemical contact, solar radiation, biological species, and lifestyle costs. These are all the parameters which need to pay attention before selecting a coating. And before winding up my lecture, just have a feel. If you spend 100 rupees for industrial protective coating, then 40% of that or 40 rupees of that 100 rupees will go for surface preparation alone. Only 19 rupees we are spending for this coating material, and for applications we have rest of the materials. This is just a cost comparison to show that how much we are spending towards the coatings. I think I have given a very exhaustive look into the corrosion aspects, and I have started from the definition of corrosion. I have explained the various reactions, complementary reactions involved into it by showing a beautiful image of combining zinc and platinum, and I have shown that corrosion consists of two complementary reactions, anodic reaction and cathodic reaction. And also I have shown the various classifications of wet and dry classifications, and slowly I have explained the various parameters or various factors which influence the metallic corrosion, whether it is atmospheric or immersed or underground corrosion. And I have taken a small tour into the thermodynamic aspects of corrosion, namely by explaining the standard EMF series and the merits and demerits of it. Then we discussed something about the galvanic series, the merits and demerits of it. Then finally, I have beautifully explained the potential page diagram and its applications in predicting corrosion and interpreting corrosion. I have also given a flavor of various forms of corrosion by giving a small pictures about the various forms of corrosion, and mentioned about the units of corrosion and the various ways of corrosion rate determination, like electrochemical or non-electrochemical and so on and so forth. Finally, the various means by which corrosion can be mitigated are shown by listing 4 different ways, and I have shown the cathodic protection, sacrificial anode or impressed current method. I have given some small input about the corrosion inhibitor, and I have little elaborately mentioned about the protective coatings and so on and so forth. So with this, let me conclude my talk. For feedback and comments, please feel free to mail me. Thank you. Please stay safe. Thank you.